Good evening and welcome to our first panel discussion forming part of the exhibition Dehumaneation by Shaun Grech, curated by Raisa Galea and supported by the Malta Arts Council. The exhibition will be running at Spazju Kreattiv till the end of the month. I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. We have Raisa Galea, Omar Rababah Adrian Grima and Flask, and we'll dive straight in. Adrian, the themes of the exhibition Dehumanization revolve around humiliation, dehumanization, and nation. What comes to mind when we talk about these themes?
I suppose the most important word in that series of words is the word nation, and it's a very contested word. It's contested because we live in a world which is, especially, in the minority world, which is more privileged and has more means and more resources. It's so much more connected. People travel all the time, people have access to different styles of life, different products, different languages, different peoples. So, in a way, the word nation sounds like an anachronism, something from the past. And yet for many people, the word nation or the concept of the nation is very important because it's what they feel they need to hang on. It's what they feel gives them a presence in a complicated, globalized world, in a world which in their mind resembles so little what we were like before. And I think the issue here is we need to deconstruct the word nation. In other words, in our classrooms, in our media, when we talk to each other, when we have public discussions, we need to discuss what kind of nation we were, whether we've been always a nation, and I'm not talking only about Malta, but in general, but also of course about Malta, and what kind of nation or what kind of community we want to be in the future. I think these are the real issues, because the minute you start interpreting the nation as a closed community, as a homogeneous community, then you start looking for the opportunities, or you start creating opportunities to dehumanize those who are not part of, in your mind, those who are not part of your community. So you need to start creating barriers which normally don't really exist. And you need to even create the past. You have to construct a past. One of the things which I think we really need to, as Maltese, we really need to revisit is our understanding of our own past. Because I think there are many myths about our past. There are myths of homogeneous culture. There are myths of people living all with the same ideals, with the same religion, with the same language, with the same ways of life, with the same moral code, etc. I think this is a great opportunity, this exhibition by Shaun, and the possibility to discuss the issues which the exhibition raises. I think it's a great opportunity to revisit these concepts, and also to start to deconstruct many of the myths, actually, that's the only word I can think of. Many of the myths on which we base our ideas, which eventually encourage us to other people, to consider people, even those who live next door, or those who sit next to us in a classroom or in a church or at the football ground, as the others.
It's interesting because you used the term we and automatically said Maltese. So in a sense, we've already brought that together in terms of we-ness and nation. And then you've pulled it all into this increased or intensification of globalization at the same time, if you like. Raisa, how would you conceptualize nation within this intensification of globalization?
I've been thinking about this constantly for the past few years, and in fact I was wondering, in fact, what constitutes Maltese identity. So when we think about it, and I believe there are, because since it's so binary, and we have two parties, and we have at least two band clubs for every village, and we have two narratives for Maltese identity, which I would roughly call one Eurocentric one, which is a minority, I would say, and which is supported by PN-leaning urban middle class, and an authentic Maltese national identity, which is the dominant one, I would say, and which is supported by more or less maybe lower middle class, working class people. And so the Eurocentric Maltese identity would say that we are not good enough yet. We are not a normal country, so that's the centerpiece of the ideology. And let the European Union teach us how to become like them. Whereas the other side, the authentic Maltese identity says, wait a minute, we are already as good as the rest, so we are not going to give up what we've gained after we've gained independence. So we are not going to kind of abort hunting. We are not going to adopt abortion. We are not going to do all of that. So that is who we are. So I would say there is no agreement between Maltese themselves who we are. And I say we because I also want to belong. Although I would say neither social category wants to include me, because for the urban upper middle class, I'm Russian, so I'm not European enough, and for the authentic Maltese, I'm not Maltese, so I just don't belong. So I don't belong either way. So I'm just sitting and watching. So this idea of a nation and what it is, we can say that since there isn't even an agreement among Maltese what that is, we can say it's pure ideology. It's just a construct to establish your own people and and your close friends in power, defend that power, and gain money, influence, and etc. from that power. So that's all to me.
Wayne, can I pull you up on the issue of social class? Raisa has associated notions of Malteseness with this binary within Maltese society. What's your take on this?
I'd be tempted to agree, although from a slightly different angle. I think first of all, I think that a nation cannot exist if the communities do not exist. And I think capitalism and globalization have done quite a bit of work in destroying and weakening communities, especially at the grassroots level. The fact that the Maltese do not agree between them on what it means to be Maltese is also a result of this. There is, yes, a social class narrative. There's also another exercise that's going on. For example, we speak of gentrification. We speak of huge building projects in the middle of smaller towns which have their communities. They are set in their ways, which is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when money comes into the equation, these communities are the ones that are the first to lose out. And this doesn't happen just in Malta. It happens everywhere you look. It happens it happened to the native tribes of the United States, for example. So I would say that we have this kind of contradiction in that the state, basically, the state brands Malta as a nation. There is a certain Malteseness to everything we do. There's the Luzzo, there's the Pastits, there's what have you, our language, our national anthem, which is a religious prayer after all. And while there's this dominant narrative of Malteseness going on, the state itself is helping the upper classes, helping the moneyed elites to destroy the communities and destroy the basic elements of our Malteseness. Adrian lives in Pembroke. Pembroke, there's a community which has been there, some of the newer towns in Malta. It's under threat from a huge project, a huge construction project, which I think is just dumping money into the middle of a town. Silvia Bono, the person proposing this project, has nothing to do with Pembroke at all. He doesn't know Pembroke, he cannot claim to have roots in that particular community, and this is happening everywhere. It's easier for things like this to happen in Malta because of our size, and that is also, I think, another factor to keep in mind.
Why?
Because our size makes things more insular. I think it's also easier for people to divide and rule, to tear one community away from the other, to tear a community from within, is, I think, a lot easier in Malta than it is in a number of other countries abroad. But obviously there are different situations, and I'd rather not make any blanket statements, but I think the situation in Malta is what it is. You chip away at one block, at one pillar of a community, of a part of society, and the job is done.
Omar, is this something that, I'm going to stay on the same theme and then I will go into more about on the economic model, but I'd like to take up what Raisa said again with you as well and look at Malteseness as this binary.
I think that the problem with Malteseness comes when a group of people define what is Malteseness according to them and put all the others that do not fit into their descriptions as the others. And that creates a challenge in society. We have had the Prime Minister, for example, in his Christmas message, saying, "I'm the Prime Minister of the Godzitans and the Maltese." When we have a chunk of foreign people living in Malta, he is Prime Minister of the residents of Malta. When they pose with foreign nurses and say how efficient we are in delivering the COVID vaccine, is he the Prime Minister of these people or not? Because a Prime Minister represents the policies he enacts for the whole country. So I think when we have a group of people defining what is Maltese, the white Catholic, speaking Maltese, and having other people that do not fit into that category, it's problematic. Because speaking for myself, I am not Catholic, so I am not Maltese. Once we start making sort of a frame of what Maltese is, we are othering and we are excluding the others. I think being Maltese is not an answer. It's very responsible for someone to make a statement on what is Maltese, because I think being Maltese is something of an individual matter. You can feel Maltese as much as you want, whatever the categories you fit in.
Omar raised an interesting point, and you actually mentioned the nurses in particular. I'll try and recall the statistics. Over the last 5 years, the population pre-COVID, the population grew by 25% as a direct result of a policy grounded in immigration. And this goes back to your first point, Adrian, regarding globalization and the changing nation. How can we look at this economic model that is grounded in immigration vis-a-vis nation and belonging?
I really think it's a question of narratives, actually. And I agree with what the other panelists have been saying. I think it's a question of narratives, because if on the one hand you're playing the nationalist card, and on the other hand you are working completely against that narrative that you're trying to sell, I think you're being a bit dishonest. No, you can't push an economic model which is based always on more for less, and then at the same time say that you are protecting the Maltese and Gozitan residents of the country. Ultimately, I think the issue we have in front of us is what kind of country we want. I don't really mind whether we talk about Malta being a nation or not. For me, it's just a category. What's important for me is how we define that nation. Parenthesis, I'm not interested in discourse about identity either, unless we're talking about an identity or a character or a community which is in constant motion. You know, which is a continuous work in progress, which it always is, of course. And that's why I was talking about deconstructing the myths, because it's not true that we were all Catholic. It's not true that we all had a specific moral code which everyone followed. These are not true. For example, in our literature, which is my area, we have narratives which are very partial. We don't talk about the cosmopolitan urban area, for example, except when the realist writers of the 20s, 30s, and 40s started writing. So they give us, so the Romantics, for example, bless their soul, I mean, but they give us a very partial idea of our country. So to me, the question today is, what kind of country do I want? What kind of community do I want to live in? Do I want to live in a community where, because the question of language is an important question, do I want to live in a community where people can't talk to each other because they are all monolingual? I think that's a problem. Do I want a country where a few people dominate completely the lives of the rest, and we are all at the mercy of an oligarchy? I don't want that kind of country. If that's Malteseness, then I'm not interested in Malteseness. I don't think it is, whatever Malteseness is. So the issue for me is, what kind of country do we want to live in?
Language, Raisa. Adrian brought up this, and it is an incredibly important topic. How do you think language comes in to this notion of identity or this evolving construction, if you like, of belonging?
Well, I was going to reflect on a different point that Adrian mentioned, and he said that to him it doesn't matter whether it's a nation or not a nation, and perhaps it doesn't matter at all, which I completely disagree, because nation, national identity, and belonging, they are all tied together. And so a nation, yes, as a project, it's inherent to it to include some and exclude others. So I would rather say, and we mentioned community. So what would be the difference between community and a nation? Because can we have communities without nationalism and national borders? And I do believe that we can. The idea, I mean, I can understand that, yes, people long for this community feeling, and they would want to belong to something larger than themselves, because capitalism makes people lonely. So capitalism tells to each one of us, you should be the best, you should walk over everyone, go compete, climb on top, succeed, put your flag in there, you're the winner. And in this constant competition, we just become lonely. So, and this idea of a nation, it offers group belonging and a sense of collectivism, which then becomes dangerous because it excludes the others, and it excludes people like myself, and excludes people like Omar. So I do not think that there is no difference whether we have a nation or not. I mean, I think it's the central point. But to answer your question about the language, it certainly is part of that national identity, and I would see that the importance of speaking Maltese and elaborate Maltese has intensified over the years, which I can understand because migration made English more common, and perhaps people feel like they're losing their language. And so I believe that there could be a solution if the government simply rolls out a program for everyone, for every foreign residents, to learn Maltese. It's a difficult language, but with some, training and exercising, it's certainly possible, and I do believe that we can do it, and also keep English and Italian. Why not? So I'm not against learning Maltese and speaking it, and I think it's wonderful, and yeah, and we should, yes.
But I'm Maltese, and I don't speak Maltese. We market the nation on the basis of English. This is how we promote it to people abroad. We tell them, come here, we speak English. And this points to these contradictions, Adrian, that you mentioned as well, in vis-a-vis nation and globalization. Is this something you want to pick up on, Wayne?
Close to what Raisa said, I think it's interesting the point that she raised about program for foreigners to learn the Maltese language. But the problem is that vast majority, it's not actually a problem, it's a statement on the actual situation. A lot of these foreigners, a huge majority of these foreigners, whether they come from Sweden or whether they come from other countries of the world, they're mostly economic migrants. So people who are coming to Malta are not coming to Malta because they necessarily want to be part of our community, but because their boss is paying less tax less corporate tax than he would in his own country. So that's a first. This is also a huge bracket of our population that is frequently ignored in the right-wing narrative. Because obviously when it comes to right-wing narratives, the right chooses the weaker of the targets and builds a narrative on the weaker communities, the weaker individuals, and the weaker targets. In this context, I think Malta as a nation cannot exist anymore. I don't think Malta has ever existed as a nation, to be honest. I think let's be frank, we've been colonized since day one, and straight out of colonization, we've taught the world how not to do things, because the way we administer our resources, very public resources, land, our sea, the way we administer a country, the way our bureaucracy runs, everything is dictated finally by the one key element, and that is money. So I think notions of Malta being a nation, I've been struggling with this for a few years. I don't think Malteseness exists anymore. We are, let's face it, we are developing this country to become one huge main road leading from one business center to the other, with some houses in between. This is, I think, the most concise and cynical explanation of Malteseness I can give you.
Omar, you wanted to?
Yes, I agree with Wayne with this notion of Malteseness, even with very important things such as the flag. We're proud of a flag that has the imprint of our colonizer, which was not given exclusively to Malta, but to many other hundreds of recipients. So are we really free? That is my question. And with regards to the points made by Adrian, the same people, all right, who advertise this idea of importing foreigners to increase the economy, nowadays they are saying that we need to cap residence permits. So these people, they used to lecture me, and I used to go to them and tell them, listen, I am on Facebook. I am reading these comments about foreigner workers, and they used to lecture me on how to counter-argument comments that say, yes, we need more foreigners, we need more foreigners. Nowadays, the narrative has shifted that we need a capping, and this creates a lot of problems holistically in education, in the property market, and it hits everyone in the medical aspect. So I think we need to have a strategy where we try to balance things out. And with regards to migrants, okay, Malta as a country of migration, we have a language that is made up from three aspects. I mean, the English.
It's the product of our migration.
Yes, we're a country of migrants. I mean, what is actually Maltese? That is actually Maltese. Wayne mentioned the Lutsu. The Utsu, the word is a Utsu, it's a Sicilian word. The article is Lutsu, it came Maltese. So, does there really exist a pure Maltese identity?
Yes. Yes.
Purity in identity doesn't exist. It's just a narrative from the early 19th century. It's romanticism. I don't think we need to go there, quite frankly. The whole idea of purity and identity is, okay, I might be wrong in saying it's passé, that it's well past its sell-by date. Unfortunately, it isn't.
Yes, I do.
I think we need to talk about what kind of community we need to build in our country, in this country.
But I'm feeling that you're disagreeing to a certain degree.
Yes, sure, but identity is always a myth. That is the whole point. Identity is not a logic. Even the goal of having an identity and the goal of having a nation is not. There is nothing logical. It's nothing scientific. The goal, yes, is to construct a sense of pride, for who we are, and that sense of pride that we are superior to others. So it just appeals to different part of us. It doesn't appeal to the brain. So if we say, does the perfect Maltese identity exist in the sense of does this perfect myth, I really underline, does this perfect myth exist? It does, and I think it's rooted in the Great Siege. Yeah. So this idea, and it ties neatly Maltese identity to Europeanness. So
but are you making this a Maltese thing, or are you making this a human thing?
So it's not a human thing. It's a purely political thing, because the idea of nations, national identity, is post a French Revolution. So it's 1789 we're talking, and the idea was to actually give to the people the sense of community, that they are not kingdom anymore, but this is the sense of community. But then in 19th century and then in early 20th century, it was perverted, and then we know the rise of fascism and the Nazi Germany, but it was born back then in the French
But if I think I'm
Revolution.
understanding Adrian correctly, what you're saying, Adrian, is yes, but this is the 21st century, and the notion of nation and belonging needs to evolve.
But I said it's a perfect myth. So national identity is always a myth. There is no such thing. It's not an objective thing. It's not an objective reality. But in terms of the perfect national identity myth, we have this myth, and it's a Great Siege, and it's so pervasive. And we see Maltese cross everywhere. And this idea, every boat is an invasion. And we see Maltese cross everywhere on jewelry. I believe in underwear even, everywhere. Everyone wants to belong.
The problem is that the people, I'm seeing these comments here all over the exhibition, these people believe that there is a pure Maltese. Some people here still live in the Great Siege. They think they're knights.
Exactly.
They go around with the Knight's Cross, which has nothing Maltese in it, because it's a symbol of the. It's from the article on your portal. So we have to deconstruct this idea and speak with these people, because it's these people that fuel this dehumanization.
But the text that we see around us didn't come from anywhere. It came from the books that we use at school, and it comes from the rhetoric used by politicians as well. So when you speak about a new narrative, Adrian, where does this new narrative come from?
It comes from, first of all, a serious and honest revisitation, re-evaluation, rereading, whatever you want to call it, of our past, and of how we tell the story of our past. Over the past few months, I've had this incredible privilege, you'll understand me, of being on sabbatical and doing research.
Unfortunately, I've never had sabbaticals. I yearn.
So I'm on sabbatical, and I have the great privilege of being able to spend days in the National Archives in Rabat and the National Library, looking at our history, or parts of our history. I'm not a historian. I'm somebody who comes from literature, and I'm looking at the story of this Maltese family, the family of Concetta Ciberas, who married Abrincat, And the way the family emigrated to Algeria, to what was then colonized Algeria, they came back, they mixed over there. In a way, they lived in the Arab quarter of Constantine in Algeria. So basically, what am I saying? I'm saying the minute you start looking at our even recent history, you start inevitably deconstructing, what's the word in English? Thought.
Dismantle.
You start dismantling the stories that you've been told, especially in public discourse. Not so much at school, because I think especially in recent years in school they've been doing a really good job with the teaching of history. But we hardly talk about Maltese migration, for example. Maltese migration was big in the Mediterranean in the 19th and till basically the mid 20th century. In the Mediterranean,
yes.
Of course, it
yes,
went
yes,
on
yes.
then in larger countries.
Yes.
So my point is, look back at the past and start dismantling the many myths we've been fed. That's the first thing. This is a country of connections, of different languages, of different religions, of different cultures meeting all the time, which doesn't mean, of course, when I say I don't believe in the concept of nation, I'm not saying we don't have a shared experience. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying we don't have a language. I'm not saying we don't have a landscape. I'm not saying we don't have communities. Mm-hmm. That's not what I'm saying. I think to round up, I think what we need to do is to look at those commonalities, to look at these shared moments, at these shared this shared heritage, which is not only a heritage, it's something live. If I can talk in one or two or three languages with the person next to me, that's something that I've been privileged to receive. So this is something we need to talk about. And I think we need to talk about how our communities are going to get together better today, and especially what kind of communities, what kind of community and communities, local communities, we need to build in the future.
Wayne, how does this feed into what you do as graffiti and in your critique of ongoing policies and challenges that arise? I see you nodding. I'm looking for the links.
There would be, I think, quite a lot to say. I think mostly from what we do in terms of activism, it is based on the concept of social justice. I think the basis of the idea is that a nation as a state has a vested interest against against social justice, the way things are, especially again because this is mostly an argument that is related to money. That the more money that is pumped into, construction is going to affect the environment. The more money is pumped into conservative lobbyism is going to affect civil rights. The more money is pumped into, another example which I forgot. The more money is pumped into certain labor policies, as we mentioned earlier on, that comes to the detriment, it's a vicious cycle that comes to the detriment, obviously, of people who are at the bottom of the food chain. The nationalistic narrative in Malta has been going quite strong, although reactions to migration have been markedly different. I remember back in the 90s, I think I was 8, 9, a ship full of people escaping Albania, docked in Malta. A lot of people turned up with food, with preserves, stuff I would honestly not have given anyone at the time, with tins of corned beef, but anyway. And the reaction was very different. Once the enemy changed color, once we were dealing with migrants from Africa, then the narrative was easier for the right wing to perpetrate. And obviously it's been aided by the state, because the state has its own interests, even at a European level, and social justice is clearly not one of the state's, one of the nation's key priorities. The key priorities for the nation were to preserve our integrity at European level. All the rhetoric about we don't want to become an open center, permanent open center, ignoring the fact that there are repatriations going on, and ignoring the fact that most of these migrants did not actually choose Malta. They had no choice whatsoever. So that's another argument that is seldom mentioned, seldom made, but which feeds into a dangerous and I think now it's late, very late to tackle it, a dangerous narrative that leads us to being one of the most racist populations in Europe.
I was going to take a comment from the but I think one of the most racist in Europe.
I do not know the exact statistics, but I remember clearly the most shocking number was that Malta, I think, was either at the top or second top of on the percentage of the population who would dismiss the rape allegation, for example. They would be least likely to believe women that like saying that she was raped, for example.
Okay.
That shocked me. And I regarding most racism, how do we measure racism, for example? If we take the Netherlands, for example, the most, the beacon of tolerance. I mean, they would clearly believe that they are the most tolerant, and whoever comes, including...
Which is another narrative.
Including Maltese, yes, that they are, uncivilized bastards who are uncivilized racist bastards. Would it not be racist too? So how do we measure racism? That is another issue. I do believe that post-colonialism and colonialism has a lot to blame for racist for the racist narratives, because the British, they look down at the locals, and in a way, when you are constantly, in a way, humiliated, you would like to compensate for it by bringing down someone else. So
you link racism in Malta to our colonial history.
Well, yes, I do believe so, and even the ideal, of white European, many Maltese, even though they would shun EU influence on issues like hunting and abortion, they would long to be taken, to be
associated with white
equal.
and superiority.
Exactly. So we are as good as you are, dear you. Just stop lecturing us and take us within your fold. Is that everyone wants to be Western, European, cultured, and I think this narrative of European Western superiority must be dismantled.
I'm going to take, because I can see hands are soon going to start waving, I think, but let me take a couple of comments. The question is whether I'm being very arbitrary here, the question is whether the construct of Maltese identity, questioning whether or not someone belongs here, remains needed and effective as a tactic for asserting power. I've heard it used before and admit that it can be quite impactful. Alex writes, I keep thinking of Godfrey Baldacchino's paper, I was thinking this one as well, of the nationless state, and highlighting, even when you spoke about the boat, the vessel from Albania, Wayne, I recall there were very different times as well. This was pre-EU.
There's also something else that came to mind in the meantime. I mean, the image of people escaping Albania, they are white people escaping communism. Government at the time probably had a little interest in, sticking one up to their heads. But when things changed, it was the same administration. Back in 2003, you had no issue sending back two planes full of people who escaped Eritrea, send them back to torture or death. So again, this is an example of how our governments have played with people's lives for their own sake, for their own political expediency.
I'm usually good at multitasking, but this is too much for me. I can't read the comments, watch the time, and think about a good conclusion. I think I have 5 minutes. In these 5 minutes, if we think about what is going on here in this space and what we've spoken about so far, where would you like to see the conversation going, Adrian? You spoke about a new narrative.
Yes, I think that's really important. I'll try to keep it short. But basically, I think we need to reappropriate a certain kind of language. For example, I think we need to either dismantle or reappropriate the word nation, the word patriot, the word traitor. We need to tackle these words head on, these concepts head on. And we need to decide. We also need to control the hate language. I think this is absolutely very, very important.
When you say control?
Control, I mean by law. In the same way that I cannot park on a yellow line, I cannot cross lines with my language which insult, offend, which hurt other people. I mean, if we have laws about transitory things, why shouldn't we have laws about how we respect each other? So these are really important.
We do have laws.
We need to enforce them. If we have the laws, we need to enforce them. So this is one of the ways we need to create a community which is more diverse, within which there are many languages, but there has to be a language or languages with which we can communicate with each other. And I have to say that I think it's delusional to think that in Malta you can communicate with the people if you don't at least know Maltese and English. English is very important in Malta, but even other languages. Why aren't we giving more space to the languages which different communities in our country speak? Arabic, Serb, Russian. There are others. At the moment there are different Indian languages.
Very rich in languages.
Why are we kicking this richness away, even if it may be for a number of years? I mean, COVID has shown us how quickly things can change. The point is, we need to be talking about what kind of community of inclusion we want, and also a sustainable future.
Omar, I saw you nodding.
Yes,
I know the issue of law.
I agree with the enforcement part. I think we need to be more active. Have a media watchdog, because I think media feeds on these narratives that we are seeing stuck on the walls in the exhibition, and we also need to educate. Sorry?
It's, the media is amplifying them.
Yes.
I mean,
because the media, racism sells on social media. The media needs to sell ads, and it does its 1+1, and it doesn't care about the individual. I think we also need to educate for diversity. We need to educate because I am very active on social media. I receive genuine comments. But why is it wrong to call someone a monkey? We call beautiful child little monkeys. I mean, where did the education system
go wrong?
I can't understand. Where did we teach about
and
this?
Where are we going
Africa?
wrong? That's an ongoing.
Why do we donate thousands to the missions, but then when they are, we are, the others?
Raisa?
Yes, I'll be quick. So I'd like to say two things. We should move away from individualism, because that's no good, but I do believe that nationalism is not an answer. We should have communities, and in this community I would also like to belong. We need to have a collective interest and collective impact and collective force, and in this collective we should stand up to the capitalists who are actually destroying communities, destroying our collective interests, destroying our environment and everything that we care for. And to all those, just a short example, who care, for example, about Malteseness and Festa, it will not be foreigners like me complaining about Festa that will bring an end, but building up all the launching sites that will put an end to Festa. It will not come from foreigners, it will come from capitalism, and capitalism will destroy our collective interests.
Individualism and capitalism?
Definitely, no, I agree with this. I think capitalist society has made everyone a lot more individualistic. Everyone's pretty much on their own, and people understand that they are on their own. They're going to work for their own advancement. I mean,
I'm all right, Jack.
Even the very concept at the time of, I don't know, paying taxes, you pay taxes to help people who are worse off than you are on the other side of town. Now that concept is gone completely. We've lost our sense of solidarity.
So the question then becomes, what do we stand for? And I'll call it here. Thank you very much for joining us, and please do join us again for our second panel later on this month.